Okay, we're recording. So welcome to the third of our Weekday Somatics. So we're going to do about 30 minutes, give or take, um, of practical exploration. And just to set that up uh, for all of us to hopefully have the most fruitful exploration, I'll just give a little bit of preface. So I just find it's helpful to have these reminders. I personally find it helpful. I hope you find it helpful as well. So why are we doing this? Well, my intention is that these explorations can help us to become more aware of our habits of, well, several kinds of habits. So one would be the habit of believing in wrong images, wrong somatic mapping, wrong ideas about what the meaning of our sensations are, wrong ideas about the meaning of the events in our lives. And so my experience is that I become aware of those things through observation, through exploration. And in particular, I find the somatic explorations to be very helpful because they highlight exactly what it is that I am doing to produce or maintain states that I wrongly uh, ascribe meaning to. So, for example, I might become aware of a habit of pulling or holding or tensing somewhere in the body that I have been in the habit of believing meant that I am anxious. Or I might have been in the habit of believing that it meant that I am frustrated. Or I might have believed that it meant that somebody else is doing something hurtful to me. Those are just some examples, okay? When I become aware of that and I observe it, and especially when I have the experience of the meaninglessness of that sensation, or at least the absence of the meaning that I thought it had, and or when the sensation morphs or disappears, then I embody that realization. It's not a theoretical realization. It's not an intellectual realization. It's a fully embodied realization. And so I find that to be very useful. I hope that you do too. So that's my intention. And as a byproduct, a really nice byproduct, I tend to feel better. So that's really nice. Um, Another couple of things just before we get right into it. You hear me say this all the time. It's won't be new to you, but I hope that you can hear it in a new way. I hope that I will hear it in a new way because it's always helpful to hear it in a new way, which is don't push, don't strain, don't make the mistake of thinking that you're going to get more from this if you try harder. So I find that I get the best results, the best outcome, the most happiest experience of it, when I soften, when I allow myself to experience what I perceive as discomfort, but without pushing, without straining, without trying to do anything to fix it. And I'm just really gentle with it. So it's like sticking a toe in the water. Just ease into the experience. I find that that's best, because if I push or I strain, well, it just doesn't tend to work as well. And I might injure myself, scare myself. So the lighter, I believe, the lighter the attitude, the lighter the approach, the more gentleness that we can bring, the better. That's my opinion. Okay, and I hope that that's useful to you. So let's sit together. If sitting is not appropriate for you, then you don't need to sit. Remember that you don't need to do what I say. What I suggest are suggestions only that I think that you will likely find helpful, but only you can know what's appropriate for you in this moment. So be really honest with yourself about what you need in this moment. If you are able to sit, then you may sit wherever is appropriate for you. I'm sitting on the floor, so that's one option. You may sit in a chair. You may sit on the couch. You may sit on the bed, whatever is appropriate for you. I will suggest that to the degree that it is appropriate and comfortable for you to sit on a firmer surface rather than a more yielding surface, it will probably be helpful, because the firmer surface will offer you more feedback. But there's a fine line that we need to be aware of, which is too firm means maybe too much sensation, which maybe is too much in this moment for some of us. So be gentle with yourself. And let's try and set ourselves up for sitting so that we could, in theory, maybe, possibly, sit still for about 30 minutes so that we don't need to adjust ourselves. So I'm going to get my legs into a position that I think maybe would be nice for 30 minutes. And see how that is. That seems nice. Okay. So the idea here is now to just find this stillness. So my invitation for all of us for now is, can we discover a stillness and remain aware of that stillness as we sit and as we explore our somatic experience together? So it's like a thread. Could we possibly remain aware of this thread of stillness? Now, that doesn't mean that we'll have the experience that we think of as stillness. That's an idea, but can we just be really curious and maybe have this awareness of an inner stillness, and then maybe we can allow ourselves to just remain aware of that stillness and allow that stillness to kind of anchor us in this exploration. So it becomes our, well, anchor. I think anchor is a good word. It's allowing us the freedom to explore our somatic experience openly because we're anchored in this stillness. Now that may or may not make any sense to you. That's okay either way. I'm just offering that invitation as a possibility. It's like planting a seed for us so that we can see where that grows and how that can maybe guide our exploration in a possibly useful way. So you might notice, or you may not notice, I'm closing my eyes because I find that closing my eyes is really helpful. If it's comfortable for you to do so, or appropriate for you to do so, I invite you to also close your eyes. The reason being that I notice that I make a lot of subtle effort to position myself in space based on visual cues when my eyes are open. So I'm not aware particularly of that. It's happening unconsciously. And when I close my eyes, I can tune into the somatic experience, the felt experience, independent of the visual cues. And then I start to notice that, wow, I was holding some unnecessary tension. I was pulling myself in directions that I didn't need to. So as we did yesterday, I'd like to invite us all to just tune into the breath. I find that this is a very powerful, really, technique, we could say. We're not trying to control the breath. We're not trying to move the breath. We're not trying to find what we have an idea of as the right or correct breath, but we're tuning into the natural breath, something that probably we don't do very often. I don't do it nearly often enough, in my opinion. And I say that only because I find it to be so pleasurable. I wonder why I'm not doing it all the time. So by tuning into the natural breath, what do I mean? Maybe that's not clear. So let's explore that a little bit. So what I find is that the natural breath moves my body. It moves, I can feel it moving the torso. And I notice that, okay, here's something really interesting, to me at least, and maybe you'll find it interesting as well. I like to observe how the breath is moving the body and then how I'm moving the body. So I notice, for example, that I tend on the inhalation to notice that the breath, the natural breath, seems to bring my body more upright. It's expansive and it just brings my entire torso more upright. I notice that. And then I notice, interestingly, on the exhalation, I have a habit of bringing my body, the torso, I think the most accurate way to describe it is that it's a contraction in the front of the body. So I notice that on the inhalation, there's an expansion, particularly that I notice in the front of the body, in the front of the torso. And then on the exhalation, I notice that I am, not the breath, but I am contracting in the front of the body. So my curiosity about this is it possible for me to allow that natural breath to soften and release and expand the front of the torso so that the entire torso becomes more buoyant softer, more supple, more pleasurable? And then can I simply allow the exhalation to occur without adding any unnecessary contraction? So if I'm doing that contraction and I become aware of that, can I just allow for the front of the body to remain soft and buoyant as the natural exhalation occurs? So let's explore that together silently for just a few moments. Also, I find this is very helpful to be very curious about the breath. So for me, the breath, or I have a habit of making the breath mechanical. In, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. So it becomes habitual and mechanical rather than natural, spontaneous, satisfying. So I find it very helpful to be curious about, how do I know when the breath, when the natural breath is complete? How do I know when the natural inhalation is complete? How do I know when it's time to exhale? How do I know when the natural exhalation is complete? What I find is that when I really observe that I have been mistaking my habits of tension to be cues that it's time to inhale or exhale. So for me, particularly, I notice habitual tension in the lower abdomen and in the chest. In particular, that I have mistakenly interpreted to signify that it's time to inhale or exhale. So I become curious, well, what happens if I don't do that? What if I don't mechanically, habitually inhale or exhale because those sensations are present? What if I just allow the sensation to be here and I don't control the breath? What if I just allow the breath to remain as it is? It's to be its own presence, its own force, its own thing. And I personally discover stillness in the breath. You'll discover whatever you discover. And as you allow this natural breath, just allow the breath to highlight any unnecessary effort or tension anywhere that you notice it, in the lower abdomen, in the chest, in the buttocks, in the groin, in the neck, throat, eyes, cheeks, jaw, shoulders, and see if it's possible that this natural breath can just gently encourage a softening and release without you trying. Because if I try, I'm trying based on my past conditioning, which is what has gotten me where I am. So my past conditioning has created this habitual tension, or rather, my past conditioning is the habitual tension. So if I am trying to soften or trying to release, I am going to fall into the same trap of doing the same thing, which maintains the same habits. So if I want something new, I have to be willing to pause and open to admit that I don't actually know. So to enter this space, it's a somatic felt experience. For me at least, of I don't know. I don't actually know which way is the correct way. I don't know where the problem exists or what to do to fix it. So can I just remain with the direct experience and allow this natural breath to enlighten me, really? I mean, it's like I'm not going to be enlightened, but this natural breath can shed light on my painful habits. Remember that you're in charge of what you're choosing. So you do what's appropriate for you. Don't do something just because I say. Anytime you need to do anything to take care of yourself, you do that. Don't push and don't strain. The softer you can let it be, the better. Okay, so now, if it's still comfortable for you to remain seated in this way and to remain tuned into that stillness and to the natural breath, please continue. And what I'd like to invite, I have so many things I want to do. It's hard to choose, but one thing is presenting itself. So what I'd like to invite you to do is to use your hands. If this is comfortable for you, if it's strenuous, don't do it. But you can take your hands and place them so on your lower abdomen or in the, as low as possible, probably, toward in the direction of the groin or the inguinal creases in that general area. There's not a very specific correct area, so you don't have to worry whether you're finding the right area or not. But just in that general area, the lower abdomen, in the area of the groin or inguinal creases, or wherever feels appropriate to you. And it's a light touch. We're not trying to push or do it's not a manual release technique. It's not some sort of deep tissue massage. We're just gently placing the hands, the fingers, in whatever way just naturally seems good in this area to start to give us some more feedback. So I notice when I place my fingers on the lower abdomen and then I allow myself to breathe, or to be breathed. I become aware in a way that I hadn't previously been aware. So I find it really fascinating how such a simple thing can produce such a profound change in my experience, where now suddenly I'm aware of my lower abdomen in a way that I hadn't been previously. I'm aware not only of my lower abdomen, but of my whole body, particularly of the thighs and the buttocks, and the ways in which the thighs and buttocks relate to the torso. So I start to feel a connection between my torso and my buttocks and my pelvis, so that I can really notice how I'm sitting. And I like to allow for my hands here. I can't really show you with this camera setup, but I like to kind of wrap the thumb on the hip bone. There's what is that called? The iliac crest. So the thumbs can kind of wrap on the backside of the iliac crest, and the rest of the hand can come around on the front side. And I find that really nice because it gives me some really good feedback. And I'm particularly interested in any I was going to say unnecessary, but we don't know that necessarily yet. Any hardness or numbness or lack of clarity or lumpiness that I notice on the front side, the lower abdomen. And I notice, does my natural breath want to move into this area? For me, it does. But I notice that I'm making unnecessary effort, which I can feel as this hardness or lumpiness. So just allow the natural breath to move as it wants to. I'm not forcing it, so don't try to force it just because I say it wants to move in that way. Just be curious to see, does the natural breath want to move down there? So this whole pelvic floor, I think for many people, is often very poorly mapped somatically. We don't really have good somatic awareness of the pelvic floor, of the lower abdomen. It's a very, from a anatomical standpoint, it's very complex. Also, very important power center for our physical bodies. So many of us have we could benefit from enhanced somatic awareness of the pelvic floor and lower abdomen. And I find that just what we're doing now, this simple, I say it's simple, it's really not that simple, is it? It's not, I was going to call it a simple technique, but it's simple in some ways, and it's really complex at the same time. It's very rich. So this technique of sitting, allowing the anchoring in that stillness, allowing the natural breath to be to the extent possible, the only movement occurring, and then to combine that with this touch on the lower abdomen, I find is extremely powerful. I say powerful just because I notice a lot of clarification, a lot of release. So clarification of the relationship between my abdomen and my groin and thighs and buttocks. Becoming aware of where my lower abdomen actually is and its nature and shape, and the possibility of suppleness here rather than hardness. So also just be aware of the tendency perhaps to make unnecessary effort and strain in the shoulders, in the arms, in the neck, and in the face when using the arms. So allow the arms to be resting. Allow the hands to be resting, heavy. Start to notice the movement, the shape of the breath. Do you notice any difference in the shape of the breath? By shape, I mean the way it moves in your body. Do you notice that it's moving differently now than before? Do you have more awareness of it? Is it possible to release in the pelvic floor, to release in the perineum? So midway between the genitals and the anus, it's the perineum. A lot of us hold a lot of tension there. Also around the anus, how much tension are we holding there? Do we need to be holding that right now? The buttocks, so when I talk about the buttocks, maybe I'm talking about a lot of different things. Well, clarify the gluteal muscles, also the fronts of the thighs. Do they need to be doing anything right now, or can they just be resting? So one more thing I'd like to point out about the breath that I find to be a very, very helpful pointer for using the breath, or using the breath as a guide in somatic exploration. There's not one right way to breathe, but there are different, let's say, different ways to breathe. There are different patterns of breathing, different ways anatomically of using the body to breathe. One way that I would like to invite you to explore now for just a few minutes as we wrap up this practical exploration for today, and that maybe you could take with you into the rest of today and maybe even over the weekend, since today, for those of you who are here live, this is it's Weekday Somatics, so we'll start up again on Monday. So you've got several days. You could explore this. Allow for the inhalation to be the active breath. Say allow. So importantly, don't force, don't exaggerate, don't strain, just open to this possibility of the inhalation being active so that you can notice some active quality to it. It's expansive. And then allow for the exhalation to be without any effort, strain, or tension. So it's like the inhalation expands and softens. It highlights where there's unnecessary restriction. I'm surprised sometimes at how big and long and slow and gentle and satisfying the natural inhalation can be, and then how I'm trying to see what the right words are, how truly it's like gliding, sailing the exhalation can be. So there's no effort made. It's like the bird who flies high up into the sky, and then the hawk, and then glides. So the exhalation is like this gentle, long glide in which the parts of the body that have been opened by this inhalation remain open, so that they are like billowing with the breath. I say that because I notice for myself a habit, a tendency of a forced exhalation. I notice unnecessary strain or effort or tension as a habit for the exhalation. And this technique or this method of inquiry that I'm describing right now, I find to be very, very wonderful for transforming that habit of unnecessary strain in the exhalation into this gliding, satisfying, slow, pleasurable, effortless experience. For myself, I notice that the end of the exhalation, when it's a gliding exhalation, an effortless exhalation, the bottom or the end of the exhalation is, if I was to say that the inhalation is upward and the exhalation is downward, just to give a kind of scale that we could use to describe the exhalation, then the gliding exhalation, I find, does not go as far down, not meaning down in the abdomen, but just to describe the volume or the trying to give a kind of metaphorical description of the breath. I find it's because it's not forced. It seems initially as though it stops short in a way. So for me, that's an adjustment, that I just remain with that sensation of stopping short and just allow for the openness of the experience rather than my habit of trying to clamp it down and force the remainder of the exhalation. Okay, so I hope that this has been as enjoyable for you as it has been for me, and I'm going to end the recording now of this practical portion. So to anybody who's watching the recording of this, thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.